So let's just dive into what is trauma, right? Most of us has probably heard that language, like it's not a new term to us, but I always love to just clarify, like let's get on the same page and know what that actually is, or have maybe a working definition of that. So one that I personally love and I use very frequently is an actual or perceived event that overwhelms a child's capacity to regulate their emotions, their body functions, their reactions, okay? Or maybe the additional piece that most of us, it's like a no-brainer to us, right, is a threat to someone's life or safety, right? Like that one makes sense. They weren't safe, like their life was in jeopardy. That makes sense as a trauma. But I love honing in on this perceived experience because I don't know what you perceive as safe or not. And you don't know what this person might perceive as safe or not. And so there is room for, it doesn't fit in a box, right? There's room for that impact still being so significant, even if we were in the same room and we had very different experiences, or we were in the same environment and had very different experiences. All right. So the actual, obviously the actual experience, we might have more understanding of, that would be traumatic, right? The actual event. However, most of trauma is way less about what happened and far more about how someone experienced it. And what I mean by that is how their body internally, what turned on and off in that moment. So, did their fight, flight, or freeze turn on, right? Did their stress response systems in the body turn on and start ringing the bells of, we don't know that we're safe here. We don't know that this is okay. We don't know what's coming next. We've had something that happens similar to this, and this does not feel right or safe. All right, you don't see that on the outside. And so how their body experienced it is really the most important piece to understanding trauma, right? What happened to their blood pressure, right? Did their eyes dilate? Did their heart rate go up, right? Did they start sweating, right? Did all of these stress response, did their hands maybe start to clench in fists? Were they completely frozen? Were they ready to fight, to flee, to run? If that all happens, right, the amygdala, the watchdog of the brain, is saying, we don't know if this is safe, so all of our safety responses are turning on. That's very overwhelming in the body, right? Your adrenaline, your cortisol goes up. Those you can't see from the outside. You might notice, if you're really in tune, you might notice when that's happening in the moment for someone else. But that's what we want to be mindful of with trauma, of exploring, whether it's yourself or someone you love, or maybe a child you're parenting, of being more curious about how did you experience that moment than our curiosity of like, well, what happened, right? We want to know more about what was that like in your mind and your body internally for you. So that I think is a helpful way to approach trauma. Most of us want to know the events. Well, what happened? Then what? How was it resolved? Oh my gosh, I can't believe that, right? We want to know the events. If we want to do a maybe more appropriate job of caring for one another, whether it's ourselves, the people we love who've been impacted by trauma, let's start being more curious about, how did you experience that? What do you remember about what you were feeling, whether it was an emotion, whether it was a thought that you got stuck in your mind, whether it was a body sensation? How do we be more curious and mindful of those things in addition to, yes, the events? But remembering that trauma is an actual or perceived experience that overwhelms someone's capacity to regulate. So to hone in a little bit on the regulation part, that means maybe normally they could be calm, cool, and collected in a stressful experience. But if their body is triggered, if their body does not know that it's safe, they might not be able to answer your question. They might not be able to follow rules. They might not be able to process what's actually going on because everything got hijacked by the fight, flight, or freeze response. So I hope that's helpful as you are exploring or curious about trauma. Of course, I dive into this more in depth in my workshop. So if that's something you want to dive into more, definitely check that out.